Hello, I'm Dr. Jodi Richardson, and you're listening to Well, Hello Anxiety, a podcast where we end the struggle with anxiety and build our toolkit of practical skills to thrive.
It's fair to say that we are not short of ideas when it comes to supporting our mental health and well-being. And if you are a long-time listener to this podcast, you of course will have quite the toolkit already. What's most important for us is knowing what it is that we need, but also finding the right activity, strategy or practice that works for us. And it's important too for us to remember that our needs will change over time, as will our capacity. Once upon a time, I meditated twice daily for 20 minutes. There's no way I could keep that up when I first became a mum and had a little person to look after. So no matter our age, our stage of life, our profession, or the amount of time that we have on our hands, there are powerful practices that can really make a difference to help us reduce stress and calm our nervous system. And we get to choose the ones, or the one, if we like, that is the best fit for us. So to help us build out our toolkit, I am joined today by the incredible Kelly Smith. She is the founder of Yoga For You, a yoga and meditation teacher, and host of the very popular Mindful in Minutes podcast. Now, we're going to hear from Kelly in a moment, but just to give you a little bit of insight into kind of the expertise that is coming your way. Over her time as a yoga teacher and a student, she has studied over 16 styles of yoga and meditation, taught over 5,000 hours, led thousands of students on 5 different continents, and is changing lives. And she is joining us from Minnesota in the United States, where it is, I think, about 7:30 yesterday, according to us here in Melbourne. So welcome.
Hi, how are you in the future?
Yes, we are. It's so strange, isn't it? It's Friday lunchtime here, and it's Thursday night for you. It's really nice too that I know this time of night you've tucked your kids into bed and you're joining us sort of right into the evening. And so I'm really grateful to you for taking some time to join us.
Oh, I'm excited to be here. And I did definitely just, get all those kids, both of them, tucked in and ready to go. But now it's like, it's our time. We get to chat about what we love. I'm not needed anymore. And so I've been looking forward to this all day.
Oh, thanks so much, Kelly. Honestly, since I learned about your work, I've been really looking forward to talking to you too. And what I love about the way you've come to your work is that, like so many who are really dedicated and really have kind of made it their life's work to make a difference in people's lives, it's started off as a very personal journey for you with yoga to begin with, didn't it? And I wonder if you could share some of the story with us, or I wonder if you could share some of your story with us about how you kind of came to really understand how healing and supportive yoga could be when times, got pretty tough for you back when you were a teenager.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started yoga when I was young, even before I could drive. And it was kind of a form of cross training for my sports. I was an athlete through college. But then when I was 16, my mom was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer. And I always like to say from the top, like, the story has a happy ending because my mom is still with us, even though it starts heavy. But it was during that time, I was one of her primary caregivers. And anyone who's ever been a caregiver, you know that it's so much to care and to give, and you give everything that you have to the person that you're caring for. And there isn't, there's really not anything left over for you. And during this time, I really had my eyes open to some of the softer sides of yoga, some of the more therapeutic sides of yoga, as opposed to just, the hot power Vinyasa that I was doing. And I used to be even a Shavasana skipper, which to me is so funny because now I teach things like Yoga Nidra, which is, anywhere from a 45 to 75 minute Shavasana. But one of my eyes.
I was just going to say before you continue, a lot of this is like another language to some of our listeners, yes. And some of it is another language to me. So we'll come back. We'll come back to these definitions. We'll come back, but I completely understand you from the sort of the high intensity, really sort of tough, difficult kind of poses and physical nature, you've come to yoga that's more mindful and meditative and slower. Am I coming up with a good kind of summary here?
Oh, yes, absolutely. And thank you for reeling me back in, because, it's so funny. And I'm sure you run into this too. It's like you talk about this stuff day in and day out.
Yes.
And then you're like, oh, not everyone sits around being like, oh, haha, I used to skip Shavasana and now I lead Yoga Nidra. It's like, not everyone talks about this stuff. But yeah, the gist of it is I first went to yoga for the physical. I was there for the stretch. I was there for the sweat. I was there for the quote exercise. And then the Shavasana is those last few minutes at the end where you kind of lay down. Maybe your instructor is leading you through a little bit of meditation or just slowing down. And when it was that time of my class, I was a very bold, 14-year-old. And I would just roll up my mat and I would leave because I was like, what a waste. And it gets even better. I was taking this class at a gym. And so I would roll up the mat and head out. And I was like, oh, I have an extra 5 minutes. I could go run 3/4 of a mile really quick.
Yeah.
And the piece of it is, and I know so many of us go to yoga first for the physical. And I had that experience too. And it's not until someone explains the why as to why it's important to slow down, why things exist like restorative yoga or yoga nidra or meditation, which are all these more meditative, slower, introspective practices, why we do these things, why they're good for us, what the point is. It wasn't until someone really explained that to me that then I saw the benefit. And when I was with my mom, obviously we weren't doing this big, powerful, strong vinyasa practice at this time. We were doing softer practices, visualizations. For oncologists were saying, guided imagery is really good for your immune system, which it is. And I didn't know at the time, but some of the things I was doing just to kind of get by and survive was sort of meditation, like slowing down, having to check in with myself, learning how to sit with my feelings, these kind of intentional introspective practices. I didn't have a name for them at the time, but now I know what they are, almost 20 years later. And it's something that meditation, mindfulness, yoga, it's always been a life raft for me during those kind of really tumultuous times in life, something to hold on to kind of stay afloat. And that's really what inspired me to do what I do now. And my mom was so loving and so supportive after I had graduated or was about to graduate university. This was years later. She was in remission and I had just, gotten this, about to get this piece of paper saying, whatever, I did it. I've never used that piece of paper, that, degree that I spent all this time. And, my mom helped pay for university. And I remember driving in the car and I felt so nervous to tell her, but I was like, Mom, I think that I want to take a yoga teacher training after I graduate. I think I want to be a yoga teacher. Yeah. And I just remember we were driving and she just kind of turned to me and she said, if that's what your heart is telling you to do, you need to do it. And that was just one of the most loving, supportive things that she could have done for me in that moment. And it's just something that felt really full circle because, it had really helped me. And then she then was helping to support me by saying do it, follow your heart. I believe in you. And she's always been my biggest cheerleader throughout this whole process.
Oh my gosh. She sounds like an incredible woman. And thank you for starting by sharing the great outcome that your mum is still with you and that she's doing so well, because I know, my husband Peter, he sometimes I'm like, he knows I'm a bit stressed or worried about something and I'll start and he say, just he just wants a little bit of the outcome, just tell me kind of what I'm expecting here before you dive into the details, because sometimes it's easy, isn't it, to kind of go with the chronological story and the person who's listening is going, well, I don't know if I want to know what happened, or I'm worried, I'm anxious, I'm keen to find out. So I love that you were able to share a little bit about that journey. And I, it's one thing, isn't it, to kind of share a little bit of your story the way that you have, but it's unimaginable what it must have been like for you to go through that as a teenager. And, it's just so difficult, facing mortality, and the idea of losing a parent is just horrendous. And so some of our listeners today will have been through that. I recently had my favourite aunt pass away, which has been really tough. And I think that's why I'm a bit run down, because I spent 12 days kind of visiting the ICU back and forth, about 45 minutes travel, and now my immune system's just gone, okay, time for a virus to come and take over for a little bit. It really takes its toll, doesn't it? And that you found something in that time that really supported you, and you experienced so much change and support that you realised, hey, I want to be able to do this with and for other people is it's really special. So I would love to come back to the different styles of yoga and some of the myths, because I know people think of different things when they think of yoga, and I think it'd be really nice for us to help listeners, because we're going to talk about some practices today. And as I said in the beginning, some people might only have 5 or 10 minutes, but I know I have a little bit of time while my kids get ready, they're teenagers, for school in the morning, and I'm at a bit of a loose end because I'm up and awake, but they're doing everything they need. And I'm like, I'll just do a 10-minute kind of yoga routine or a stretching routine or something like that, right through to doing a 70-minute class, which obviously is available to people. So could you talk listeners through, if they've never been exposed to yoga before, where's a good place to start? What are some of the main styles? And then, some of the maybe the myths as well. Happy for you to start anywhere that feels comfortable, because I've thrown 3 kind of questions at you.
Oh my gosh. Okay, well, I'm happy to unpack all of that. And before we dive in, there's 2 things that you said that I want to highlight. One is I just want to hold space for just what you're going through emotionally. And I didn't know that you were going through all of that with your aunt and having to, deal with loss and all that. So I hope you're being gentle with yourself. And, I imagine that you're going through a lot. So I just want you to know that I heard what you said and that I'm holding space for that. And I hope that, you're doing the best you can.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah.
I really appreciate that.
Yeah. And, the other thing you said, a little more lighthearted, but you saying that your kids get themselves ready for school gives me a lot of hope, because I am in the thick of, I have a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old, and my 3-year-old has just started preschool, and he is definitely not getting himself ready. I feel like I have orchestrated the moon landing just to get out the door to get him to preschool a couple of days a week. So you've also given me a little bit of hope with that too, that there'll be a day that, they'll take their own potty breaks and they won't need me to, usher them around, and
it will come,
do all of that.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. And it will come faster than you think. And there's a little bit of, kind of grief involved. Like my daughter's 14 and our son's 16. And I look at them, like I dropped them off at school this morning and I watched them walk in, and I just took this moment to just take a moment to go, oh my gosh, they're so grown up. And the fact that they can get themselves out of bed and do absolutely everything from make breakfast, one empties the dishwasher, they've swapped jobs, one has to put the chickens away at night so they don't get eaten by the foxes. So they have their jobs, but to make their lunch and to make their breakfast and to clean up after themselves and clean their teeth and brush their hair and put their uniforms on and pack their bags for sport and everything. It's there's absolute hope for you. And then you too may have a little bit of time for yoga while your kids getting ready for school in the morning.
Oh my gosh. Well, and there is definitely, I imagine, some grief with that too, because I even see it. Like, I know this wasn't your question. I promise I'll answer your question in a moment. But this made me think of something that maybe some of your listeners will appreciate, or you will. But I think a lot about how everything is a cycle. So I think a lot about the 4 seasons we have. And, we need all of these 4 seasons to have like the cycle of a year. We need springtime, which is like the beginning, the renewal, the budding, new things. We have summer, which is like you've really hit your stride. You're just enjoying, the blossoms and all of that. And then you have fall, where you think about, starting to release and shed. And then winter, which is, yes, death, but also rest and the preparation for then a new cycle to begin. And sometimes in those moments, I think about, with so many things, whether it be, my career going through a big change when I became a mom, or when, now my son is a child, he's almost 4, but like my youngest is still kind of a baby, but when they hit milestones, thinking about how we have these different cycles in our own life as well. And so I might still be in the spring of motherhood and knowing, it sounds you're more in like the summer of it's just kind of happening and going. But everything does kind of have this natural cycle of like birth, life, vitality, releasing, changing, and then ultimately, dying. So something new can begin. And so that's something that I think about a lot in the good times and in the hard times too, when you're facing a really hard change, recognizing when those seasons of your life are changing as well. And, what that means and then what ultimately will lie ahead.
I really appreciate you sharing the thoughts that you just have around the about change and seasons and the cycle of life. And I was just writing my newsletter, and if you are not subscribed to my newsletter, please jump on and to my website and sign up, because I share things on my newsletter that I don't really share anywhere else. But I will tell you now, I was writing my newsletter this morning, just the introduction, and sharing how what it's taught me is just how precious life is and how finite it is, and how, the 3 days before my Auntie Jen had a stroke, I was on the phone to her because I wanted to buy her tickets to a meditation event to join Mum and me. And she was so excited, and she's like, I'll pay for you. I'll pay you for it. And I'm like, no, I want to buy it for you for your birthday. And we'd had a beautiful chat, and we did do things together. We did spend time together, and she knew how much I loved her and my family loved her. And we did have time to talk with her before she passed away. But just that one day, you've got this woman full of vitality and life with making plans and hope for the future. And then 3 days later, that all changed. And so it's taught me a lot. It's taught me a lot about grieving and about processing and about acceptance and about impermanence, but also about really holding on dear to the things and the people and being present with the people that I do love, and wanting to make sure I do spend time with the people I really care about. And also how I feel more inspired to kind of think, well, if something happened to me, what would I be sorry I hadn't kind of done for the world, and in terms of, the things that I want to do personally and professionally. And so there's so much to think about, and isn't there, when it comes to something like this. But I wonder if you could speak to, like, obviously you're a yoga and you're a meditation teacher, and you've like all human beings, you've been through so much already yourself, and this is like, yoga brings to participants so much more than movement, doesn't it? I know that we kind of have another question kind of hanging, which we can address, but your kindness and your holding space and your thoughts are really comforting. And I wonder if you could speak to kind of, maybe before we come back to the first question, maybe speak to kind of, what can yoga bring for people over and above the kind of like, lengthened muscles and a time to sort of calm and be mindful when it comes to kind of like coping with life's ups and downs?
I love this question. And I think that there's space for, both of these questions, where, just like you said, there's so many great kind of physical aspects to a yoga practice, like being able to lengthen your muscles, take care of your joints, your connective tissue, low impact, weight bearing movements, connecting breath and movement together. All of these things are so great for your body. And the thing that I love about yoga is that it's more than just what you're doing for your body. There's also things that I could do. I could do low impact, weight bearing exercises for my muscles and my joint health that isn't yoga. I could find that somewhere. I could just stretch. And the difference between stretching and yoga is so much more than that. In the yoga world, we call it the 8 limbs to yoga. This man, Patanjali, who's kind of like the grandfather of yoga, he kind of coined this idea of like the 8-limbed path. And one of those limbs is asanas, is in Sanskrit, or the poses. So that's 1/8 of what yoga is. And the others are, we're going to test my knowledge here. So we have the poses, we have the breath is another component, meditation, is one, which is different than another, which is concentration. And then we have these things called the yamas, which is how you sort of interact with the world around you. There's the niyamas, which is how you sort of interact with yourself. There's a component of, how you interact with yourself and with the world around you is a part of yoga. You also have the kind of samadhi, which is sort of like the union of the self. Some people will interpret that as awakening, that sort of a piece. And then I am missing, hold on, I have to go through it again because I'm realizing I'm missing the eighth. I have yamas, I have niyamas, I have poses, I have breath, I have meditation, I have concentration, I have samadhi, and there's one, anyone who's listening that is a yogi, I'm sure they're screaming at me right now, but there's another one that I'm missing that will come to me probably at the worst time, maybe yes. After we end our chat and later, the eighth limb. But the point in all of that is the poses are 1/8 of what yoga is. And the component of the yamas and the niyamas, so how we interact with ourselves and how we interact with others, these have always resonated so deeply with me because it's things like nonviolence. And of course, we think about nonviolence and we think of, I'm not going to go out and do harm to others, but it goes farther as to I'm also not going to cause harm to myself. That could be through things like the way that we speak to ourselves. It could be something like the way that we maybe, even things as like restricting our food because we want to look a certain way, but ultimately, we're harming our bodies because we're not giving it the nutrients that it needs. Honesty or truthfulness is another one. It actually comes right after nonviolence. And something that always stuck with me in my yoga teacher training was how these two are right next to each other because they're interwoven of how you can be honest and truthful, but still do that in a nonviolent way. And that's always stuck with me about how, clear is kind and you can be honest with someone, but yet not cause them harm in that same way. And I think it's those components of learning about how a yoga practice is within and can weave into everything that you do that is so much more than just stretching for me. And then the meditation piece, of course, I love is also one of those limbs. And so I think it's just so much broader than we realize when we're just, walking in, like I did when I was, 14 and my gym had a yoga class and I would walk in and stretch because, my coaches said it would be good for my body, but it's so much broader than that and deeper than that.
I think it's so interesting to learn. I don't know much about yoga. I haven't done a lot of yoga in my time. I know my body and my brain and my mind and my heart would love it and need it. And I've actually started having a look around locally to see what's available in my area that might sort of fit with my schedule. But I'm really surprised to hear that the poses, which, and I am probably not alone in thinking that that's the predominant part of the practice of yoga, whereas when you say it's 1/8, and it's evident from listening to you and talking to you and the beautiful, very kind and caring way that you supported me, and we've only just met here on the podcast through going through one of life's difficult times, that you embody everything that you obviously teach, and that yoga, a practice of yoga, can bring so much more to a person than what if we've never done yoga before, you might understand it to bring to your life. And I guess it's a good time to come back to if a person listening, someone listening, thinking, hey, you know what, I used to do it, I'd like to get back into it, or I've never done it, this sounds like it could really be something that would work for me, that I'd like to try. What are some of the classes that one might be able to access? And I know you are a non-location dependent yoga teacher as well, so I'd love to talk to you about that and what you offer. But like, person's never tried yoga before, where's a good place to start, and what might they expect in a beginner class? And maybe talk us through a few of the different styles and aspects to the yoga that you teach and that you've learned about through all your studies.
Yes, I would love to. And I'm grateful for this opportunity because I know that for many people, it feels like there's a high barrier to entry for yoga because it can be kind of confusing, to be, completely honest. Or you can look at these things, you can look at it maybe of a local studio and it's sunrise vinyasa, afternoon hatha yoga, evening restorative, Saturday yin yoga, Iyengar yoga, all of these things. And you look at that and you're like, I don't even know what that means.
No.
Like, which one, what's for me? And if someone's listening and, they're wanting to start a yoga practice, some of the more common practices, one that you've heard me talk about already is Vinyasa. This is going to be your classic yoga flow. It's where you're weaving breath and movement together. You might do, if you've heard of sun salutations, you might do that, but it's your very kind of flowy, inhale, reach up, exhale, hinge at the hips, fold forward, that kind of movement. I think that a beginner's Vinyasa class is a great place to start. It's very not traditional in the sense of like it's one of the ancient practices. It's actually one of the newer styles in the yoga world, but it's a very common style and it's not quite as rigid as some of the more traditional practices, things like an Ashtanga practice, Iyengar practice. These are ones that tend to be a little bit more rigid, which isn't bad. It just may not necessarily be like if you came to me as a friend at a dinner party and said, which class should I start with? That may not be where I would necessarily start personally, but they're all beautiful practices. And I want to make a note here that I think both finding your yoga style and your meditation style, because there's so many different styles and lineages of meditation, it's kind of like shopping for jeans, which we all sort of dread, but it's like you have to try on a lot of different pairs. And then when you find the one and you're like, this is it, like this is the pair, it feels so good. So know that when you're trying these things, maybe if I say, start with maybe a beginner's vinyasa, but you try an Iyengar practice and you're like, these are my jeans, that is amazing. I love that. I also think that yin yoga is one that we're seeing a lot of, and this consists of longer holds, and it's an entire practice focused around connective tissue, so our fascia or our joints. This one can be tricky because you're holding the poses for quite a while, and so your mind can go a little crazy. So mentally, it can be a bit challenging, but I love this for connective tissue health. And so anyone who's wanting to focus on joint health, I love yin yoga for runners because we're always moving on that one plane of motion. It can be a little hard on our joints. Our connective tissue gets quite tight. I think yin yoga is a beautiful practice to round out any other kind of movement that you're doing. And then restorative yoga, also longer holds, but they're longer holds and they're passive openings. So you use a lot of props. You get to use pillows and blankets. It's very relaxing, very restorative. This one is phenomenal for recovery, nervous system support, giving yourself that wind down time that you need. I love restorative yoga. Again, fewer poses because you're holding them longer, so your mind can be a little busy. But that's not a bad thing. A really skilled restorative teacher will give you something to do with your mind at the same time as you're moving. You may see a Hatha yoga, sometimes pronounced Hatha, Hatha. This is one where you'll do different poses, but instead of being connected in a flow, it'll be like you'll hold a pose for a while and then you'll change and then do a different pose.
Okay.
Hatha yoga is like one of the sort of older, more ancient practices, but those I think are all wonderful places to start, but it's sort of based on what your intention is with yoga. If you really want to move, you want to flow, you want to, maybe have a little bit more vigorous of a practice, go for more of a vinyasa. If you're like, I am just burnt out, I am tired, I need a break, go for a restorative practice. If you're focusing on your joint health, give yin a try. So think about, what is my intention? What do I hope to get out of a yoga practice? And then just through a little bit of research or even listening to us chatting today, see what style might best suit that sort of intention that you have.
Kelly, you have helped me make sense of all of the different styles of yoga that I've been seeing as I've been kind of just Googling and looking at what's available and thinking, when can I fit this into my schedule? Because I'm a CrossFitter. And so I'm like your super high intensity, lift heavy things and, kind of work myself pretty hard. And I know my brain and body would appreciate maybe some restorative yoga. And you've got me thinking about a few things, because I've heard about Yoga Nidra, which I discovered was really non-sleep deep rest, which is how I came to learn about Yoga Nidra. And then I think, well, hang on a second, why has Yoga Nidra got a different name? Is it so that it appeals to a wider audience? And it got me thinking about whether or not you found, over your many years of working, owning your own yoga studio and teaching, whether or not you found that people are unsure about whether or not yoga might work for them and fit within their kind of religious beliefs and their spiritual beliefs, and whether or not there could be a misalignment there. What have you found, and what would you say to anyone listening who's thinking, oh yeah, that's me?
Yeah, you know what? I'm so glad that you asked this question. It's actually one of my favorite things to talk about, because I used to have a yoga studio about 10 years ago, and it was in a part of the US that I would say had more conservative religious beliefs. And before I dive into this, the one thing I want to make clear is I hold space for all of this. So whatever it is that you believe, I love that you feel rooted in your faith, whatever that is. And if that feels fulfilling to you, I truly love that for you. And I think faith is such a beautiful thing. Whatever your faith is. And I think that there's space for different interpretations of that. So I would say that when I had my yoga studio, this came up a lot. I remember I was teaching a class at the public library, and this was truly like a one bar, one Walmart town. I think there may be 3 bars because, we had our priorities right in this small town. And I had moved there for love for my husband's job. And I had moved from Minneapolis, which is a large metropolitan area. And I remember I was teaching a class at the public library for just like a kids class, a kids community class. And I had brought a book called Peaceful Piggy Meditation. Just this cute little story about this pig who basically learns emotion regulation through little bits of mindfulness, like throughout his day at school and things like that. I remember I showed up with Peaceful Piggy Meditation librarian and told me, she said, oh, you can't read that book. And I said, oh, why not? Like, what's the problem? And she said, the parents are going to be upset if you read a book about meditation to their children because it is, against their beliefs. And I had never heard this perspective before, which is kind of my own ignorance in a way. I just had never really been exposed to this particular thought. This was also 10 years ago. So I was in my early 20s, and, my eyes were just being open to the world around us. And I thought a lot about that. And many of my students brought the same concern to me. And so I love being able to speak to it because I have a few different thoughts. One, I recognize that a lot of these practices, Yoga Nidra being one, meditation being one, they are old practices. They are ancient practices. I do both Yoga Nidra and meditation teacher trainings, and a component of those trainings are learning the history of the practices. They are very old. So many different forms of belief have a version of meditation in them. So meditation first is just single-pointed concentration. It is like if your mind is a light bulb, you're walking around, the light's on, it's shining on whatever you're doing. Meditation is turning that light bulb into a laser pointer and taking that laser and focusing it on just one thing. It is the act of single-pointed concentration. That is not religious. You can choose what you want to point that laser at. You absolutely could make this a part of your devotional practice. I find a lot of similarities and synergy between meditation and prayer in my own personal belief. I find that being able to take that single pointed concentration and focusing it on prayer or my faith or whatever it is, you can decide what you point that laser at, but the act of taking your mental power and just focusing it on one thing at a time, that is not a religious belief. Where things get a little murky sometimes is when these practices were being born, they were at a time where, one, there wasn't necessarily this separation between communities or government and religion and all of that. They were born from cultures that were pretty homogenous in their religious beliefs as well. But the act of single-pointed concentration, that's not a religious practice. You can choose to make it that if you'd like.
Yes.
But it is not inherently that. And yoga can be the same thing. And I do think that Yoga Nidra does at times get repackaged or rebranded, renamed in a way to make it more palatable. I know not all of my peers are going to agree with me with what I say. That doesn't bother me. I know that not everyone feels that way. For me, that doesn't bother me. Another repackaging of Yoga Nidra is called iRest, and it's used a lot at the VA. Here in the US. And I think of my grandpa who is about to turn 95 years old. He's a vet. He goes to the VA. Is 95-year-old Grandpa Kenny going to go to the VA to take a Yoga Nidra practice to help process his emotions? No, there's no way. He's just he's always like, oh, hey, kid, what are you doing? You're still stretching with people every day, whatever. He's Grandpa Kenny. We love him. But is he going to go to a Yoga Nidra practice at the VA? No, absolutely not. Would he consider if maybe one of his doctors said, hey, I'm noticing that they use it a lot for PTSD, things like that. Hey, we have this, this class coming up with this thing called iRest. And it's sort of this thing where, you're putting your body to sleep so that you can, maybe work on some of that stuff without having your body flare up. Would Grandpa Kenny consider that? Yeah, maybe. And I think that I don't think it necessarily matters what you call it, to me, at least in my heart. If people are finding benefit in it, if it's reaching the people that are needing it and wanting it, and for whatever reason, the name Yoga Nidra doesn't feel palatable or doesn't feel in alignment. Again, I know not all my peers are going to agree with me on this, but I think it's more about getting the tools to the people who need it and not letting this idea of it has to be called what it's always been called kind of get in the way.
Yeah.
And these practices, when you look at them, for example, Yoga Nidra or iRest or what did you call it?
Non-sleep deep rest.
Yes, non-sleep deep rest. That is another one that I've heard too. So the idea behind these practices is that we're trying to put the body to sleep in a way. It's incredibly restful for the body, very supportive for the nervous system, but it's also really great for things like anxiety, which, I know you love, and PTSD, because there's this idea that if we can put the body to sleep and sort of put the nervous system on snooze mode, that then we can do some of this work on a deeper level without getting these big physiological responses to stressors. So take PTSD, for example. We know that obviously there's something going on. Even if you look at your body, you say, okay, my body, quote, looks fine. I look healthy. I look okay. But then you get a trigger and there's this big reaction. There's something happening that isn't just skin deep within us that we need to work on and support. So the idea is if you can put the body to sleep while keeping the mind open, you can do some of this work on deeper layers. The more traditional yogic tradition is that we are made of the koshas, or these different layers. So our physical body, our energetic body, our mental body, our wisdom body, and our bliss body. When you peel back all these layers, you're brought to Atman, or the true self, which is right at the center. And you're basically, Yoga Nidra, this practice of consciously peeling back these different layers so you can come face to face with your true self, where you can plant this positive seed of intention. I love Yoga Nidra for that, because one of my personal missions in life is to help people connect to their true self, because I think that's kind of the secret to having a fulfilling and joyful life, is living from your truest self, getting to know the self and living from there. However, do some of these practices of being able to sort of put the body offline for a little bit so that we can work a little bit deeper, is that, a bad thing, or is that not useful because it's not necessarily the quote traditional way we were doing it? No, but we can take some of these skills, we can apply them in different ways and still get really great benefits from it. So I love the practice of Yoga Nidra. I mean, obviously I love it. I teach people how to teach it, but I think it's phenomenal. And unlike my peers, I'm really kind of okay with repackaging or taking some of these different tools from our toolbox and making it apply in a way that feels comfortable to us. But I do want to my belief is that these things are not inherently like a religious belief, but also always trust your gut. So if you're listening to me and you're like, that sounds okay, but I'm just still not sure if it's for me, you don't ever have to do it. And if anyone tries to tell you otherwise, I would be a little suspicious of that, because that kind of goes back to sort of those yamas and the niyamas too, of you don't need to force this stuff on people either. If it speaks to you, give it a try. Or if you're like, you know what, some yin yoga to help support my connective tissue and my joints, that feels good to me. I'm not ready for yoga nidra yet. That doesn't feel right. Great. Then don't do it.
Yeah.
Go take care of those joints and connective tissue, and yoga nidra is not going anywhere. But I don't think it's a bad thing that we do this all the time, in my opinion.
No, thank you. I love that we've been able to talk about that, because these are conversations that I've had, particularly with my mum, where she's been a little resistant to some of the ideas that I've shared, because I'm a very curious person and very open to trying a whole range of different experiences, and it's something I'm obviously incredibly passionate about teaching as well. So yeah, I really think it's important, and as you just said, it's got to feel comfortable and it's got to sit well with you, and we only know that through trying something and seeing what that experience is like. One last question I've got, we've only got a little bit of time left, but when you talk about connective tissue, it reminds me of what I've been learning about connective tissue and the vagus nerve and the relationship between the two. And I wonder if, just before we finish, because I would love for you to share, please, how listeners can work with you and connect you and find you and follow your wonderful work. Could you speak a little bit to the connection between connective tissue and the vagus nerve and how that one influences the other?
Yeah, so I think you're actually going to be able to answer that question better than I will, because I am actually really excited that you brought this up, because I'm still learning about, I would love to kind of give like the vagus nerve 101, because I love the vagus nerve. However, I think a little bit of a blind spot of mine, or something that I'm still learning, is this sort of relationship between the vagus nerve and connective tissue. And as you said, you've been learning a little bit about it too. So I'd love to share kind of the vagus nerve 101, but then I would love if you could educate me on what you know about it too. And then maybe we can both leave having learned a little something new, because I think that's always, I just love learning. So the vagus nerve is a cranial nerve. It's a 10th cranial nerve. I always joke my personal favorite, but I think it is. And as it suggests, cranial nerve begins in our brain, and it's a big player between the mind-body connection. So it's a bilateral nerve. It begins in the brain, it goes down through either side of our throat, and then it goes all the way down and actually ends in our gut. So it truly is this long nerve that connects like the gut and the mind, and a big mind-body connector. The thing that's cool about the vagus nerve is it can work as sort of this light switch for our nervous system. So we have the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system, or the fight or flight and the rest and digest. We often live in a chronic space of fight or flight. It happens to all of us. I certainly am not immune to that, even as a meditation teacher. And the vagus nerve is great because when we stimulate it, it can help to get us out of that fight or flight mode and start moving back either to a homeostasis or into the rest and digest. It's also a very superficial nerve, so we can activate it in really simple ways by like light tapping on the side of our neck. There's some fun exercises where you can like interlace your fingers behind your head and keep the head one way straight, but then sort of look to one side with your eyes and yawn. Things like singing, some breath work, like breathing in through the nose, big open mouth exhale is great. There's so many simple, quick, easy things that you can do to stimulate the vagus nerve, which in essence just helps to shift us out of that fight or flight that so many of us live in chronically. It's just sort of the way that we live, with being overstimulated all the time, being so connected all the time, and living really high stress lives. So to me, it kind of feels like the sort of light switch, or almost like a cheat code to getting out of that fight or flight and more into the rest and digest side of things. So I think that it's really great, but I would love to hear about this connection with connective tissue.
Oh, look, I like you, and I so appreciate, gosh, it's so nice to normalize not having to know everything.
If you're coming to me for all the answers, you've got the wrong lady.
Same here. And yes, I'm in the midst of nervous system school through Jessica Maguire, and I'm enjoying it so much, but I had to put it down for a little while and I'm coming back to it. But what I was beginning to learn was around connective tissue, also known as fascia, being almost like a film or something that kind of covers our muscles and tendons, and correct me if I'm wrong, this is my understanding, is kind of like right throughout our body we've got connective tissue as our bones and our tendons and our ligaments and our muscles and everything all kind of help us move our skeleton. But not only that, they're connected through to glands and our endocrine system. And one of the things that I was learning, which sort of prompted me to sort of see if you could elaborate, but was that when our connective tissue sends messages, like is related and connected to our vagus nerve also, that helps us understand why our posture can have an impact on our vagus nerve and on the state of our nervous system. And again, I'm just learning, but from what I recall, like a really slumped posture versus a very sort of more upright posture can send signals through to the vagus nerve about, it's almost like we can feel sad and dejected and hopeless and slump, and that we can sit up straighter, and through the changes and through the messaging through our fascia, we can send a message to our nervous system that helps to change how we feel. And so interesting and so relatable. So you'll love it when you get to this on your journey with understanding about the vagus nerve. And Jessica, if you're listening and I've mucked it up, let me know and jump back on the podcast with me to help people understand. But yeah, that's it. The vagus nerve is just, I remember studying the science of happiness, 2016, quite a significant time ago, maybe even before that, and the vagus nerve was being talked about during those studies, and just over the years since then, it's just there's so much more understanding. I mean, it's been something that's been researched for a long time, but we're able to actually find ways to put that research into practice, and for us to understand our nervous system. And one of the things that I just think about when it comes to yoga or some of the practices that you shared before, humming, singing, breath work, vagus nerve stimulation and the like, that just a little balm, a little bubble bath, a little rest, a little kind of calm and stillness for our nervous system. We need to find ways to kind of snooze our nervous system and let us come back into that beautiful rested state, because we can't get through life when we're always activated and always stressed. And we can cope with stress, but we just need to know how to kind of bring it to a close and bring it to an end. And so, yeah, it's nice that we've been able to touch on this, and maybe we might have to come back on the podcast next year and maybe have another conversation and dive a bit deeper. But Kelly, it's been just an absolute joy chatting with you. You are just such a gift and such a light, and I know listeners will be keen to find out more about you and your work and how they can connect with you. Can you share with us, please?
Oh, I would love to. And thank you for such kind words. If anyone's listening and they're like, I want to try meditation, I'm not sure how, I'm not sure where, I would love to invite you to come over and check out my podcast, which is called Mindful in Minutes. And it's a collection of guided meditations. I've been doing it for almost 7 years. So there's hundreds of guided practices over there. They're all short, sort of to the point, like grounded topics, things like anxiety, sleep, happiness, all sorts of things. So I'd love to invite anyone to come over there. You can find it wherever you're listening to our voices now. And then if you want to learn more about anything else that I do, whether it be trainings, retreats, events, you can go to my website, yogafreeonline.com. And over there, I know we didn't talk too much about the nervous system, but it's something that you and I both love so much. But I have a 5-day nervous system reset. It's totally free. It's just every day for 5 days, you get sent an email. And in that email has a guided practice, a little bit of learning, and a guided meditation to support your nervous system. So that's a place where we can connect. Otherwise, I'm over on Instagram at Yoga for You Online. But wherever you find yourself being pulled, just go in that direction and I'll see you there.
Oh, that is brilliant. And yeah, the 5 days of meditation that people can receive is a way to kind of build that toolkit out, isn't it? There's, when we kind of talk about finding the right fit, and it's been such a theme, finding the right fit and trying the things that will work for you. We've talked about so much about yoga as just a really beautiful restorative practice if that's the way that you're inclined and that's what you need, versus something that's more strenuous and more challenging physically. There's something for everyone. And so in terms of our toolkit today, you've given us an understanding of yoga from a whole range of different perspectives, so that we've got a better understanding of what we might be signing up for and maybe where to start. And of course, you've got your offerings online as well. So Kelly, thank you again so very much for your time, and thank you for listening. Thank you. I hope you loved this episode as much as I loved talking with Kelly. And check out Kelly's offerings online, follow her on Instagram, and please, yes, if you enjoyed this episode, please write a review. I love reading your reviews, and really does make a difference to how the podcast is viewed by others. It helps people to trust that what they're coming into here in our little podcast community is something to be trusted and something of value. So thanks again for your time, and I will be back with you again next week. Okay, bye.
Thank you so much for joining me for this week's episode. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and leave a review. To keep the conversation going, I'd love you to join me over on Instagram. You'll find me at Dr. Jodi Richardson. Also, if you'd like a copy of my free 5-day mini email course, Calm Your Anxious Brain, then jump over to my website, drjodirichardson.com, and you can sign up down the bottom. I've really enjoyed having your company. Thanks so much. See you next time.